I'm especially glad and honored to welcome you to this talk with a fantastic artist, Miles Aldridge, who is a photographer whose images are instantly recognizable for their saturated color, their cinematic lighting, and dreamlike precision. And Miles was born in London, studied illustration at Central St. Martin's before moving on to become a photographer known for these highly staged cinematic images. These are painstakingly staged photographs that Miles will tell you more about how he's working with. And they mix fashion, art history, and pop culture, as well as religious imagery. And they kind of make beauty feel slightly uncanny. But more on that from Miles himself, of course. So please welcome on stage Miles Aldridge. Welcome, Miles.
Thank you, Johan. Is this on? Hello? Yeah, thank you, Johan.
Thank you for being here. You and I first met in New York when we were renovating our would-be Fotografiska New York with hard hats.
Yes.
A year later, COVID happened, but we still managed to make a show. It premiered here in Stockholm in 2020. You couldn't be here then because of COVID, unfortunately. So we're extra happy to have you here today.
Very happy to be here as well, finally, after all those years. Yeah.
Before we dig into your work and how you started out, I just wanted to ask you about the title of the exhibition, because you're quite fantastical with your titles of your artworks, and you named the exhibition Virgin Mary Supermarket's Popcorn.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about this title?
I was just in the mood for a kind of list of things. And it just sort of struck me. It was a gigantic retrospective. I think it was like, I'm going to guess 86 images. It seemed to be in my head, some more. And I just thought kind of like to summarize the epic quality of that as a sort of almost like a shopping list. Felt like a kind of the right amount of humor and sort of to disarm the viewer in a way before arriving. Yeah.
And it does kind of list a lot of the imagery in your work in a way, kind of sums them up.
Yeah.
But you started out as an illustrator. Or you studied
right. Illustration.
Yes,
I did.
Tell us how you began your journey into the art world, and when did you become a photographer?
So I grew up in London, as you said. My father was a very famous art director and illustrator. He worked with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Elton John and The Who. And so I grew up amongst all these incredible psychedelic, very colorful rock and roll imagery that my father had made. And he also worked for Penguin Books, actually. And he did all the book covers, or he designed all these book covers. And so there was a constant sort of understanding that images were important in my life as a child, and making images. And of course, having a father who is an artist for a child, I think is, I think it's one of the most wonderful ways for a child to grow, in terms of, I just remember, sitting on my father's lap while he was drawing his amazing pictures, smoking his cigar and, inhaling all this smoke and watching this picture kind of appear from the whiteness, And I had no other idea in my head up until 20, maybe, that I would be a version of my father. I had not rebelled against this idea that I would just take on the family business, and I would do book covers and record covers, and I would, I wouldn't have to have a proper job, as it were. I would have the benefit of working from making imagery, which I think is one of the great gifts that we can have if we can make our livelihood from making images. We are doing something that I think is one of the most human things to do, which is to make something. Like, think of somebody making a brick or scratching a design on a wall. It's so primitive and basic. So that was always my goal. And so I went to art school to become my father, as it were. And I came out of art school, and I was an illustrator. And the funny thing is, I instantly kind of, having done that whole journey, I found it very boring when I came out because I was not working for the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Elton John. I was working for Well, I was doing okay, but I was working, I remember doing sort of like, ludicrous illustrations about trees with coins to illustrate some idea about growth, financial growth. Do you see what I mean? So like kind of really quite dumb stuff, ultimately, visually. And, but also I felt I was now 20, let's say. And so I was a young man, and I was full of beans and energy, and I wanted to do stuff, and I didn't want to be just sat at a desk with a watercolor box and some paints and a piece of paper. I wanted to go and do things, big things. I had big ambitions, and so I, as I still do, have many conversations with myself, and I had the conversation with myself age 20 from art school, and I said, okay, so if you're not going to be an illustrator, what are you going to be? And I talked to myself about this, and I thought I could either be a photographer, and I thought about Avedon and Brazil and Helmut Newton and Guy Bourdin and David Bailey, and I thought, oh, well, okay, well, I could also be a film director, and I thought about Fellini, Antonioni, Godard, Truffaut. Wow, these are great jobs. And so there was a period of in my early 20s when I was trying to do both, and in the end, sort of like spinning this wheel of fortune, it landed on making pop videos, which is something in between. So I became a pop video director, and I was definitely not great at that job because first of all, I'm very unmusical. I don't have a very good ear for music and for rhythm and pace. But secondly, I really hated the bands in terms of I found them very annoying. I didn't want to film them. I wanted to make my sort of version of Apocalypse Now or The Shining, and they were just a kind of a hindrance in order to try and get my feature film made. But it would always be, I would always have to do the band performance, which I resented. And in your 20s, you're an angry young man. You're not just a young man. You have this sort of like testosterone and fury and desire to be someone famous, and why am I not famous already? This kind of anger, and so it was completely irrational because when you're older, you have another conversation with yourself and say, the reason you become famous because you have something to say, not just because you are young and explosive with energy and want to say something. I want to say something. What do you want to say? Well, I don't know, but that's the problem of being young. Anyway, so by doing pop videos, I managed to skirt. Did you want to ask any more questions, or just I gotta keep going?
Go ahead.
With this one question for half an hour. So by being a pop video director, I was able to skirt many of the things that I now do in my proper job, meaning that I was able to understand lighting. I was able to understand set design, costume in a way, makeup, hairdressing, and performance. And so, what I would say to any young 20-year-old who's full of beans and energy and wants to do something is that actually I believe as long as you are doing something, all those things will actually add up to being something that you will use later. So my whole experience as a pop video director, and I think my experience of being a pretty bad illustrator, they all kind of culminate in my work that I do currently. And while being a pop video director, I had a girlfriend who she was a singer, and she sang classical madrigals from the sort of 16th century. And I met her outside a tube station because she was singing this beautiful music. And I was about to go on the train, and I came all the way back up the stairs to kind of listen to this music and look at this beautiful girl singing this incredible stuff. And she became my girlfriend. And at one point she wanted to become a model. So she asked me if I would take a photograph of her. And because I was now a pop video director, I knew how to use a camera. And so I took a photograph of her in the park, very simple black and white picture. I took it to the chemist to get processed, to give me the prints back. And she put one of these little 4x6-inch prints in a portfolio and went to see Vogue. And we met at the pub. It was a pub in Soho called the French House. And I was waiting for her, and she turned up and I said, so how was Vogue? And she said, well, the funny thing is, I want to meet you. And I was honestly, I was literally like this, and the beer came flying at my face. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, well, we showed the photograph and they thought it was great. And here's the card. She says, can you phone her tomorrow? And so I phoned this woman, head of photography at Vogue, I guess, photo editor, let's say. And she said, oh, can you bring your portfolio in? I didn't have a portfolio. I had like a shoebox with some photographs of the canal and sunsets. They were quite good, kind of basic stuff. Other photographs of the girlfriend, maybe. Anyway, so I went to meet this woman, and Joe something her name was, actually. I'm going to say Joe Matthews. Anyway, I think she just, I don't know what, anyway, she encouraged me to get on with it. And honestly, I swear to God, if you look at the chronology, this is all true, within 6 months, for some reason, and I don't know why, but somehow, with luck and a good wind behind me, I was photographing the covers of all these American magazines. W magazine, British Vogue, Allure magazine. And it was, I think if I was to say, okay, that doesn't really make that much sense. The reason it happened, I think, was simply that in London particularly, there was a kind of a new revolution of photography occurring, which was called grunge. And the rudimentary ideas about grunge were that it was not professional. And so that's where I came in, because I was not professional. So I was a sort of amateur with a pre-Raphaelite looking girlfriend. And the fact that I could just photograph her without a hair and makeup team, in daylight, without props, and completely the opposite to what I actually ended up doing. But it was very much, that was the moment. And so I think Vogue thought, oh, we found the real thing. This is the real thing. And I lived in a council flat, which was great for them, for the story. And so within, that's how I got into photography. Now, I loved it, and I thought, what a world, because it was like really a circus. It was an amazing time. So if you need a date, it is basically, we are now in 1996. Okay, before the internet, fashion magazines are gigantic. They are full of advertising, and therefore their magazines are full of money. And so they, when I started photography, anyone who does photography for magazines now will not understand this at all. But it's incredible. There was so much money in the business. Now I know what it's like, because I still work sometimes for magazines. They have no money, and the photographer has to pay for everything. But I was such an amateur that I didn't know what lights to use, what camera to use. And so I would just order everything. And then I would, on the day, think, oh, well, let's pick up a camera. And it was all rented and paid for by Vogue or someone. And it was incredibly, it was extraordinary when and how quickly that has changed to being not like that at all. But, when I was saved by great assistance every time. And I think if I had a talent at all, it was just a sort of a confidence with the camera, looking through the lens, talking to a beautiful model, and being kind of, I was unafraid. I was, when I was a kid, I had terrible acne, and I was, for me, beautiful women were like untouchable. I couldn't dream to talk to a beautiful woman. And so I kind of carried that scar all my life, I think. But when you put the camera to your eye, it's suddenly, you're kind of like removed from that scenario. You're not actually with them. You're watching a movie, but you are doing the voiceover. So I remember this moment very well, but when I was in front of Linda Evangelista, who was a big deal back then, I sound like Donald Trump saying that, actually, but she was a big deal, and I remember looking through my lens at her, and I said, and I just said, could you just open your mouth? And her lips parted, and it was so sexy and incredible. I took the picture, and it was this sort of extraordinary power and freedom that the camera gave me. And I think, so going back to my point, I think if I had anything, it was a fascination and a sort of incredible respect for beauty. I mean, I was just amazed to be plonked from my council flat in this New York studio in front of these supermodels, these glamazons, and also the fact that I could talk to them, and the fact that I would talk to them and they would do what I said. You know, it seemed to be an extraordinary, like a ticket that I'd won, like a Willy Wonka ticket. You know, so that's how I started photography. So that's me. 28 now, maybe in New York, and working for all these magazines. So yeah, it's a good time for another question, maybe.
This is great. You're making my life so easy. Thank you, Miles. So that was the beginning. No hair and makeup teams, very ad hoc, which is something completely different to what you ended up doing, and perhaps is recognizable for what we see behind us, these picture perfect, but also kind of eerie images. Can you tell us about like the process now when you take a photograph, when you do a shoot, because it's quite elaborate?
Yeah. Okay, so I worked like that for a bit, and then I actually had a kind of revulsion at this kind of bland photography that I was doing for these American magazines. And because I'd been an illustrator, and what I said earlier about the fact that everything you do as a young person, it will make sense later. So the fact that I had been an illustrator, what saved me actually was that I could draw to a degree. And so, okay, just so you understand, so that time in New York, there was never a plan. This is really important, actually. So there was never a plan. You just turned up. You were booked for 2 days for a Vogue or Allure or Vanity Fair or something. You had no plan. You arrived, the subject, the model arrived, or whatever they were, the hairdresser arrived, the stylist arrived, some clothes arrived, but no one had a plan. It was sort of like, oh, you know, I thought the hair could be like this, and then the makeup artist will argue, oh, well, I don't think it should be like that. It should be, because I was thinking of doing a lip like this, you know, and so it's a back and forth. Meanwhile, I have my coffee and drink the New York Times while I'm watching this, and I have no plan at all. I'm like, you know, if you don't mind me saying, I'm kind of like slightly terrified of the whole thing. And I know at a certain point this coffee will be finished and it will be my turn to have an idea. I don't have one just yet. But so all of those early shoots were done with no concepts, no idea. And then I realized that if I had an idea, it would change everything. So I took a piece of paper and I did a drawing. And my first ever idea I had was a couple in a car making out, and the car was being invaded by plants that were growing, and all the windows of the car were broken. And it was sort of like, I don't know where this idea came from, but I did a drawing of it, and I brought it to the studio the next day. And everyone had turned up thinking, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I had this drawing, and it had so much power, this drawing. And so suddenly someone had found a car and they brought it into the studio, and they were smashing the windows and putting plants in it. And the two models had no idea they had to kiss. And now they were kissing, and the hair and makeup, and it all became like directing a movie. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. So that's how I started. And that's how I still work, actually. I still work with drawings and ideas. And, you know, I mean, I know behind me, these things are moving one after the other, and you've seen a lot of my work. Some of it is inspired by real life. I think, was there a picture of ketchup? Okay, good. So that's good. I'll tell a little anecdote about that, and the way I like to work and the way I think is that, so in my first marriage, my wife had made some dinner, and she came in with the dinner with some ketchup on the tray, and I was watching a movie, no doubt, and playing with the kids. And as she came in, the door swung back and knocked the ketchup, and the ketchup fell on the floor. And it was just a kind of like a plastic bottle of ketchup, and the ketchup, of course, was ketchup color, which is a sort of red-brown. And I instantly saw this image, and I just thought, wow, this is an incredible image. It's so like domestic. It's like a close-up about domestic kind of something, madness, domestic brokenness, you know? And so, but instead of like photographing it there and then, like, a sort of a reportage photographer would do. I did a drawing of it in my sketchbook, and I took it to the studio, and then I went to the supermarket and I bought 20 bottles of ketchup, but all the glass bottles, and I emptied them out and I washed them and I smashed them all. And then I chose the best bits and I put them on a black and white floor, and I mixed up some red paint that was more red than ketchup, more like a fake blood from a Dario Argento film. And I dripped this all over the bottles and I photographed it. And this is one of the first times I did this, and it seemed to be a way to tell my story, my biography, through images, but rather than being there at that very moment, photographing that very thing in a sort of, as I say, Bresson way or Latique way, I was doing it in a more like a sort of Fellini way, meaning that I was seeing something, experiencing it as like a memory from my life, and I was rebuilding it. And so I sometimes say about my work that it is real life, but as if it is seen as a Hollywood musical, meaning that the ketchup is more red, the glass is more, it's glass, not plastic, and it's more sharp and violent, and just more cinematic, really. And so that's how I answer. Is that a good answer?
Very good answer. And there is, I mean, I've seen some backstage of your work when you shoot. It is kind of like a little movie set, right? There's a lot of action going on, models moving, ketchup bottle, and maybe not smashing, but there's still that active part to the images. Do you see them kind of as stills from a film rather than a photograph?
Yeah, there's somewhere between, maybe like somewhere between a film still, a film poster, a painting of the poster. You know, the kind of they're very meta. They kind of go around. I mean, going back to that young man having that conversation with himself. You know, shall I be a film director or a photographer? You know, I mean, in a way, I think I would have rather have been a film director. And in some respects, I think it would makes a lot of sense to just say that my photographs are an apology for not being a film director. And it's my way of trying to have if I was a film director, I'd make a film like that, you know? So, yeah. And you know, I'm a cinephile as well, meaning that I love the history of cinema. When I was a pop video director, this is quite funny as well, that when I was a pop video director, again, I had no ideas. And so the way I would try and get an idea would be I would sit in the cinema and watch what used to exist then. I'm not sure it exists now, but it would be like a double bill or a treble bill of Jean-Luc Godard or Fellini. And you just sit and watch like 7-8 hours of cinema. And you, at the end, scribbled on a napkin with my coffee would be the idea, because it was take something from the movie. Oh, the film, the pop. So it was how I always did my pop video ideas. It would be based on an obsessional viewing of one director's work. And through that process, I absorbed so many cinematic, kind of cliches and concepts and traits that when I got the job of being a photographer, when I had a chance to be a photographer, I just sort of like latched onto all of those things. And it's true that, I like to put up lots of lights. Some of them, I admit, I don't even know if they're doing anything, but we put them up. There's a kind of a rigor and a kind of a structure to the lighting that is like kind of very serious, but at the same time, it's also just following a series of kind of rules I've given myself about beautiful lighting. The other thing to say is that from the beginning till now, I've shot on film, and I continue to shoot on Kodak color negative exclusively, because I think all the movies I love, all the things I was inspired by as a young man were obviously made on film, predates digital. And I do think people, just look so much better in those films. And the bottle of ketchup looks better in those films if it was in a film. Or, an unmade bed with satin sheets looks better shot on film. Film is just much more poetic and gentle, and even from a technical point of view, the difference between film and digital, if you want to know, is that with film, you can throw a lot of light at things and it will never fully overexpose. There's always something in there. So, if we're like this scene with film, this white paper will always have information on it. It won't be just a white hole. And in digital, you would have to light for that. And then we are then compromised by the lighting of that to light ourselves. So I've stuck with film. I like a couple of other things about film. I like the primitive quality of film, the way colors, this blue scarf would just become a block of, Yves Klein blue. But also I like the process. I like the idea that we are not so quickly satisfied with the picture as an artist. So if I have an idea for a picture, I like that I don't get to see it until it comes back from the lab. And that process of not seeing it creates an element of stress in me and anxiety that I haven't got the picture. And consequently, I take the picture again and again and again and again, looking, observing, and checking each time that, have I got it? I don't know. And I'm going to do it again and keep going. Whereas I think if I had digital, I would have been happy like 2 hours earlier. And it's the lack of knowing that forces one to concentrate. And I think, again, I don't want to be anti-digital, because God love you, if you want to shoot digital, it's great. But I am pro non-digital, as it were, analog, just because, for those two reasons. One, I think it looks better, and two, I just feel that process of not seeing the picture is very different from looking at the picture, meaning that when you are photographing and reviewing at the same time, constantly back and forth, you are easily pleased. And when you don't have the benefit of reviewing, you go deeper into the picture. And I think that's why, if my pictures have any sense of kind of depth and profundity in them, and beyond just being a pretty face or a beautiful dress, that's why, because there's an intensity that is probably generated from my own mental state while I'm trying to, okay, so the point is, if you put all these lights up, they're all doing things, they're all flashing, and they all, and the camera is a machine as well, and you kind of like, okay, so I'm looking at the model, and hoping the camera is working, I'm hoping that I've set it correctly, I'm hoping the lights are doing everything, and this stress of all of these things drives you to be in charge of every aspect of that picture. And so that's part of my sort of speech about analog.
Speech for analog. We're going to open up to questions in a little bit, but I have one more for you. And that is, you touched upon this, but this beauty in your images, and we talked about the perfection of a lot of it, but there's this slightly uncanny mood often, and something that doesn't feel quite right. There's some eerie element to them. Where does that come from, and why is that important to you to include?
Beauty. Wow. Well, I'm obsessed by beauty and the history of beauty too. And one of my favorite scenes in the whole of cinema is from La Dolce Vita. I don't know if anyone knows this film, but I'll summarize it quickly. It's about a hack journalist, a very crappy journalist, who wants to be a writer. He's not very good. And he's obsessed he wants to be better than he is, but he's just a hack journalist in the end. And he takes himself away to write his novel. And he's writing his novel very badly on a typewriter in a little kind of holiday retreat. And there's a very beautiful waitress there, 15-year-old girl, who keeps putting the jukebox on and dancing and distracting him. And he's like, for fuck, will you turn the music off? I'm trying to write my novel, And then he stops and he looks at her and he said, wait a minute, let me look at you. And he looks at her and she has this, he says, turn to your profile. And he looks at her and he says, but you're like one of these angels from a church in Umbria. Where are you from? And she says, yeah, I'm from Umbria. And she said, like, you're painted by Fra Angelico. It's incredible. And this sort of, I love this scene of seeing beauty in the midst of something so mundane and the frustration, the desire to be an artist, but actually, right in front of him is this beauty, which is, undoubtedly her sort of great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was painted by Fra Angelico for a church in Umbria, And so beauty is a real thing. I mean, I think, we live in a time where it's kind of frowned upon in a way, but I think beauty is a real thing. I believe in beauty. I believe in the history of beauty. I believe in cinema and the obsession with beauty in cinema, all these incredible actresses and actors that were just stunning. And why are we interested in this story? Because they're beautiful. We want to follow them. We believe in Ingmar Bergman, believe in Ingmar Bergman. Hello, here I am in Sweden saying that. Well, I meant to say we believe in Ingrid Bergman. That was a Freudian slip. We believe in it because she's so gorgeous and beautiful. We want to know her story. We want to hope. We pray that she survives this trauma, this story that she finds herself in the middle of. We've been directed by Hitchcock, for example. Beauty is a great motivation for me anyway. But, I grew up through fashion magazines, and there was kind of an embarrassment of riches of beauty there. Back then you'd go backstage to a fashion show and it was just like the Roman Empire in a way. This sort of like beautiful people everywhere, half naked, boys, girls, men, women, dressing, and it was extraordinary. And this is the 1990s, not that long ago. I don't think it's like that anymore, but and again, the fashion magazines, it was like beautiful pictures by Mario Testino, by Bruce Weber, Herb Ritts, died so young. It was beauty. I mean, so much beauty. It was almost to a point of vomit inducing. It made you sick at a certain point. I believe in beauty. I believe in Fra Angelica. I believe in Fellini, all these things. But at a point, magazines became so obsessed by beauty, this kind of beauty, that I thought it's sort of like slightly disturbing. And so I kind of like wanted to undermine that beauty and have something that was the person themselves questioning who they are, so that we are, still like the viewer in the cinema watching the great, beautiful actress, the star, perform. But at the same time, there's some kind of like poison to this beauty and the kind of undermining and destabilizing of that, rather than just this sort of endless presentation of like not only beauty but wealth and luxury and having everything. At a certain point, I wanted to destabilize that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Miles, and for sharing your story with us. I want to open up for questions from the audience as well. If anyone has anything to ask or wonder, I'll pass around the microphone.
Just like yourself, I love movies and film, especially older movies like Dario Argento, like you said, David Lynch, Wong Kar-wai are big inspirations for me. But recently I felt that I haven't been quite as inspired by newer movies. So I wanted to ask you, do you have any newer movies that you feel you have been heavily inspired by?
I mean, it's a very good question. And I think, the short answer would be I think the short answer would be no, unfortunately. But, because I think that back catalogue that we're both riffing on, you and me, is so inspiring. And, it works. I think digital has had a profound effect on the visual landscape overall, including cinema, and the way movies are now made. I mean, I'm just thinking, I watched the new P.T. Anderson film, One Battle After Another, and it has some incredible bits in it, but it's definitely, compared to his film Magnolia, it's not doing it for me. I don't know about you, but it seems to be a lot of talking, that film, whereas like Magnolia is more like a film about images, and I think in general, there's a movement towards talking and conversation in film and less striking images. So yeah, I saw The Smashing Machine as well. Have you seen that? It's sort of okay, but again, it didn't. I think time is a great critic, and let's see how if these films are still being discussed. Then
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Oh my God. Excuse me.
Hi.
Congratulations on your retrospective, and thank you for being here with us today. Not to beat a dead horse about film, but I'm very curious about your interest in film, and you speak so lovingly about film. I think it's incredible. Just to be kind of curt and in lieu of time, why is it that you haven't pursued any filmmaking? And if I don't know, would you be interested, I suppose, to do kind of like a career pivot of sorts? You could be the person who brings film back into cinema.
Well, thank you for asking that, because actually I've written my first short film after wanting to since I was in my 20s, having that conversation in my head in that wall. But I've written my first short film. It is has funding, it has half of the cast, and it has an incredible DOP, costume designer. And so we're in the process of doing it, and it'll be a 20-minute film, and I hope to shoot it. I've recently been saying shoot it this year. I think realistically we'll be shooting it early next year. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I would like to ask if throughout your career have noticed any shift on what people perceive as beautiful and not.
Yeah, that's a very good question too. Of course, absolutely. Because I was given the example of, like, being backstage in the 90s, and it was, everyone was these extraordinary supermodels. In fact, I was married to one as well. And, for various reasons, social reasons, through the last 10 years, that has evolved, and there's modeling and fashion photography sort of serve slightly different purposes now than to just celebrate, kind of like to worship at the gods of beauty. That I think there was a swing of the pendulum, which was very much overdue, I think. But to sort of embrace other aspects of beauty, age, weight, ethnicity, and these things, and so forth. So we are now, in a much more sort of varied world. It's just that when I landed in that world of fashion, it was not like that. It was much more sort of fascistic beauty. There was sort of one sense of beauty. It was not democratic at all, and it was kind of amazing. It was, as I said, like landing in the Roman Empire in some respects, I think. But yeah, of course, I've noticed that, and let's see what the next stage is. But I think that was timely and important, and I'm also there to embrace that too.
Thank you.
All good. Thank you. No more questions. So glad. But thank you very much, Miles. Thank you for being in Stockholm finally with us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the exhibition.
Put up with me.
Thanks for being part of this show as well.
Yeah, and I'm very honored to, and such a great institution, and congrats on 15 years.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.